Hey, this is Pastor Curry, pastor of the East Iron Fair Baptist Church, Wilmington's most exciting church, the church that love ya and anything you can do about it. Today, we're going to continue in our discussion with Councilman John Street, as well as with our friend, Brother Owens, as we continue to talk about, and we're going to spend some specific time talking about the Leaderboard standards that their cops are under, and we hope and trust that we can give you some good information. So go ahead, call somebody real quickly and say to them that Coffee with Curry is on, and Street and Owens is back with them, and we're going to give you some good information, and we're going to get after it right now. So let's get after it. And we're back. Listen, I asked my good friend, fraternity brother, the lifeline of civil rights at this moment in the state of Delaware, Councilman John Street, to come back, as well as my newly found friend, young man of great wisdom, Brother Coby, Owens, to come back so that we can talk. After the show, I talked to many of you who watch us, and you have given me your comments, and I had to go read up on some of the policy, especially on the Leaderboard policy, and I did not know. It's all right to share truth. And as a pastor, I'm charged with protecting my people and the community that I serve. But when I read the tenets of the Leaderboard statute or status or whatever it is, I was mesmerized to see that the good old boys club is still at work, protecting the wrong. No one wants to ever believe that we don't believe in policing, because we do. My father served for almost 40 years in policing, but criminality is something that we cannot tolerate. Racism is something that we cannot tolerate. And when I look at the statute, I find that it is very much prevalent. It's able to cover up. As a daycare provider here in the city of Wilmington, if one of my colleagues or one of the people who work for me, if one of them do something wrong, we have to report that to the state, and the state put them on the website. And that tells all parents and all persons, this person is contaminated. This person have been found guilty of this, or this person have been charged with this. But not to do that for even the police department is egregious, erroneous, and just outright demonically demented. So today I want to start off, and I just want to talk first in this first segment about the statute 100%. And I'm going to ask our friend, Brother Owens, if he would start that conversation. And Councilman Wright, you are, not I called you Councilman Wright, Lord have mercy, Councilman Street, I want you to jump in as you so need to.
Yeah, so again, last time we talked about Leaderboard, the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights, and how it adds extra protection to police officers here that, one, civilians don't have, but even other government employees don't have. And what it does, it stops civilian oversight. It stops officers from being held accountable for their actions when they commit crimes and break the community trust. It has become a weapon against transparency and accountability here in the first state. We saw Maryland just repeal theirs and replace theirs. We've seen other states, pretty much since the civil uprising of last summer, take steps to amend. And Delaware is still in a waiting period. The task force, since the last time we spoke, they did vote out the recommendations, but we still haven't seen any bills pre-filed. And we really want to make sure that that legislation that's going to come out is the strongest legislation for the community, not for the officers.
Now hold right there, because I got to refer back and forth because my audience wants to be educated strongly. Yep. He shared that, since then, we know some states have already did some reform in that whole system, but he's saying that now they're at a point where it has been voted out of committee. What is the next step?
Well, the next step is that if it's going to go forward, and it hasn't been voted at a committee. The task force has made its recommendation.
Oh, the task force.
Now the legislators, it has to be assigned to a legislative committee, and that committee has to vote on it. And then the committee, if it approves it and it votes it out of committee, then it goes to the General Assembly, and it depends on where it starts, whether or not it goes in the Senate or it goes in the House.
So where do my viewers and those who hear us today, where do they go to start the letter campaign? It's time to move this process.
Well, they go to their state representative and their state senator, but I can tell you now, for the most part, city legislators are on board. The Legislative Black Caucus is completely on board, but you have every right to contact all legislators and let them know how you feel and what you'd like to see them do. And I fully understand, respect, and appreciate what Coby's doing, what the ACLU is doing, and that effort. I appreciate the efforts of the Legislative Black Caucus, and I have zero confidence that anything's going to change in this legislature.
You know, this is the one time I want to hope you're wrong, because if it doesn't change, then we have to up the heat of our interaction with our senators. You made a comment last show, and you shared that charity begins at home. I use those words, but that's in essence what you were saying. And because we have a president who is from this state, and I certainly supported him during his time, I believe that we owe America the example of us being from where Biden is from. We're going to lead the way in this. And if the governor is listening to me today, if legislators are listening, let's make J Street wrong, and let's make sure it happens. I cut you off only because I want to make sure we going back up certain things you're saying. I want to make sure everybody's understanding. So go ahead, continue on.
Yeah, so like Jay was saying, you know, it is a process to this, and you know, the next point is getting the bill written up and getting it into a committee. Now that's where the real fight's going to be. Depending whether it goes to the Judiciary Committee, Public Safety Committee, we don't know where leadership's going to assign it, and they can assign it wherever.
Where would you like it to go? As a leader, as an activist, which committee would you hope it would go to?
I view the House Judiciary Committee as the most friendly to the community. Mm-hmm. They have a lot of advocates who are already on board with the idea there, whereas the Public Safety Committee has a lot of former officers on it.
Who makes that decision?
In the Senate, it's the Senate Pro Tem, and in the House, it's the Speaker of the House.
All right, who's the Speaker?
The Speaker of the House is Representative Schwarzkopf, who's a retired police officer.
A retired police officer. Say his name again.
Schwarzkopf.
Okay, you will see on your TV his name and his email address. We want you to email him, and if you can't get it quick enough, call the church, and we're gonna make sure that happens. Who's the person in the you said the Senate is the other, what's the other place?
The Senate.
The Pro Tem.
The Pro Tem.
And who is that?
Dave Sokola.
Yes, it's Dave Sokola, who was the former chairman of the long-term chairman of the Education Committee. He's not a police officer. Okay.
I think reason why we're doing it this way again is that we're gonna have to make sure that we're giving you the information, because our community is affected, and our community is affected strongly. You can continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I love this conversation. But pretty much for this session, what we're looking to do is a few things. So we're looking to amend the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights to do, one, have more transparency. So we're asking for public records of misconduct of officers to be available to attorneys and also to the public. So it would be a FOIA request opportunity for the public. But when it comes to when they're on trial, the civil and criminal attorneys would be able to access those records as well too. Right now in the state of Delaware, they can't get that information.
Now, do we know why? They can't, because they're protected by the Lear Board.
Yeah, it's written in what can be given out to non-law enforcement, non-internal investigators. It's written out what time, what place, and how far in advance they're supposed to get notice of when they're either going to be questioned.
So you're telling me that my teachers who make little of nothing, if they make a mistake, they lose their job immediately without there being any trial because we're dealing with children. And there's a police officer who can have had 5, 10, 15 complaints that may have been legitimate and may have even been found legitimate. And we will never know.
Yes.
They can transfer from place to place, and
there's no do not hire list. There's no, and see, that's the thing. One, that needs to be done here in Delaware, and there is an option for departments to do that, but it should be a requirement for all 48 departments or 42 departments to pit any misconduct into those so that we know who not to hire here. But also, this is just speaking on a federal level, it has to be done nationwide.
Yeah.
You look at what happened in Dover with the officer who kicked the young black man in the face while he was handcuffed. He, went through a whole process here, ended up retiring with his pension, and then moved to Maryland where he killed Anton Black.
is that the same guy? Oh my God.
So if you look, they have a law in Maryland, a part of this repeal and replace that they did for their Lear Board called Anton's Law that addresses that. And it honestly, it throws a lot of pressure on Delaware for not handling our bad officers and sending them there. They said it's been a track record.
Oh my God.
And that's exactly why I stood up there in Rodney Square and every opportunity I've had in front of the press to say to the President of the United States that if you're really going to be an advocate for police reform, you need to start at home. And at the point where, and I believe it's going to happen, the situation with the county police and the shooting of Lyman Moses, I think it's going to get national attention. And it should have national attention because as far as I'm concerned, those 9 shots fired in Riverside at 1:30 in the morning are just as egregious as the 9 minutes in Minnesota.
Absolutely.
And if what the investigator that is working with the family says, if the fatal shot was fired in the side of the head, and that's what he's reported publicly, then the violation of departmental policy and the violation of basic human rights, it has to be dealt with. And I doubt if the conservative population is going to sit idly by and let President Biden scream, holler, police reform throughout the nation. And this is going on in the state of Delaware.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely correct. As a former director of a neighborhood center, anytime something happened with a child, you have to report it to child care licensing, and then you've got to make a decision, and sometimes they make it for you, as to whether or not that person can remain on site and remain employed. Even if they do something in the community that has nothing to do
That's right.
with their job.
That's right.
And I have an example where mother found it necessary to beat her child. Oh, the child went to school and my mama beat me. Well, she almost lost her job. Had to get a lawyer and all that. And the judge made it so that she didn't have to lose her job. But when you make the comparison between what other employees are subjected to in terms of discipline, in terms of reporting, it's just fundamentally unfair and inappropriate for police officers to be held to a different standard.
Yeah, and I'll even give you a better example, not even better, but another example, and that's happened here at our center, where a strong, she was a very good teacher, matter of fact, outstanding, but she was in her community and someone attacked her and her daughter. She responded to defend herself, not here at the center, but in her community. And as soon as they found out that there was a charge, she had to be immediately discharged from us, and she can no longer work as a daycare provider.
Until that record is cleared, and at the point where probably hasn't even gone into court and been convicted.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Charged. I'm sorry, you was going to say something, then we're going to go to a break.
Just talking about the investigation. I mean, if you look at Delaware police here, it clearly says in Leopold that they have to be investigated by their own people internally. And from just having these conversations over these last few months, the officers think, oh, well, the community don't know what we go through. Well, yeah, okay, that's fair. You don't know what me as a black man go through when you're harassing my cousin, my brother, my neighbor, right? So that's why the second push in this is amending it to allow community-based review boards to also have investigatorial power and subpoena power to actually get to the root cause of what is going on in the community. We've seen IA, internal affairs, try to handle things, and it's not working. Absolutely. Because a lot of those, you don't even get follow-up if they do an investigation. And then if they, if something comes of it, it's usually written off pretty soon. They get a paid administrative leave or something like that. They stay on. They're not being held accountable for their actions.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that when we come back. We also going to, well, part of what we're going to be talking about is also about how they can retire right away, get their full benefits, go other places. And there's so many things they get away with that we cannot do. I don't want anybody to believe that we are against police. We are not. There are some outstanding police officers. There are some people who serve their community well, but there are some bad apples, but it's a racist system. That's the issue. It's not prone to support the African American or people of color, and that's a problem for me and for those who sit around this table. We'll be right back.
Hello, my name is Hanif Salam, and I am the ACLU of Delaware's Smart Justice Campaign Manager. And I just wanted to share with you why police reform is necessary in Delaware. Delaware is only one of 15 states that has a LEOBOR law. LEOBOR is an acronym for Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights. And with this LEOBOR law, it essentially allows police to investigate police, meaning if there is an accusation of police misconduct, other police officers will then investigate the situation and come to a conclusion. Even with that process, LEOBOR prevents the findings or the conclusion to that investigation to be accessible to the public. And this really prevents transparency, which then prevents true relationship building between the community and the police, right? LEOBOR also prevents us from having effective civilian review boards. The city of Wilmington last year passed a resolution to create a civilian review board, but that entity would not be able to have proper oversight, subpoena power, and investigative power without amendments to LEOBOR being made. So the Smart Justice Campaign is advocating for a LEOBOR bill that will make police disciplinary records accessible to the public and will allow for effective community review boards. We've introduced our ideas to multiple legislators, and what I'm asking you to do, whoever sees this video, please reach out to Representative Frank Cook and ask him to pass a LEOBOR bill this session before June 30th so that we can have true police reform in Delaware, have more transparency and accountability, and then we could begin to mend the relationship between police and community. Thanks for watching.
What a great conversation that we're having, and now we're going to turn our attention stronger to the accountability. Don't forget, call the church. right away and or give us an email so that we can give you the information you need in order to start speaking with your legislators. We are serious, and I'm very grateful that Councilman Street brought Brother Owens to us, because this is a moment where we gotta move on this. We cannot just sit back and let it be. Too much is happening in our communities, but a lot of times it's a result of the system that we're living under. So we're going to go back to the accountability part. You can continue, my brother.
Yeah, so again, with the times we're living in, what we saw with George Floyd and with the Derek Chauvin case just a week ago or 2 weeks now was a step towards accountability. Mm-hmm. But one case is not going to solve all the police brutality in America. Right here in Delaware, we have to have accountability for officers' actions, and that looks like a few different things.
Okay.
So I'll start at the brother on brother one, right? Mm-hmm. So we need officers who see bad things happening with other officers to intervene.
Stop there. On the back of me, right there, you just heard him talk about the brother on brother. We would call it the fraternity thing, where we are silent and we are permitting people to do things that are inappropriate. It has to cease. That's why I wanted to slow him down so that you can hear what he's saying. They won't. What happened with the George Floyd trial has really never happened before, where you have all levels of the policing going up against their own. Here in Delaware, I don't think that would happen.
No, let's be real crystal clear, okay? Because of Title 11, 464, because of Title 11, 467, because of Title 11, Chapter 92, which is the law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights, if George Floyd had happened here in Delaware, the officers would have never been arrested. They'd have never been charged. You'd have never, and they would have justified the use of force, and they would have used Title 11, 464, and they'd have walked away. That's how serious this is, and when you make that comparison, and you can bring any lawyer in the state, let them come in, bring Kathy Jennings, and I'll argue with her that if George Floyd happened in Delaware, the officers would not have been charged. Now, she's up against it right now because she's got to make a decision as to Mr. Lyman Moses, but at the end of the day, she was a deputy prosecutor when Jeremy McDowell was shot, and even though Mac then said, if not for 464 and 467, I would have charged, then, and what I said to him, well, I did not say to him, I said it afterwards, because I was so angry when he announced that decision. But in retrospect, what I should have said, and I said not long afterwards, oh no, you need to charge them anyway, and make sure that they file under Delaware law and try to walk away with it that way, and then make Title 11, 464, 467, and the Policeman's Bill of Rights, make them withstand the constitutional test that they have not had to withstand since they were implemented.
Wow. It's the Floyd family today. It could be yours tomorrow. Unless we act today, we're going to keep hearing these type of conversations. We're not asking people to go in the streets and do the violent stuff. But what we are saying is you got to pay attention now, because it could be your son who is faced, brutalized, and done wrong. And you're going to want everybody to jump up. It could be your grandchild. It could be you. And you want everybody to jump in support. It starts now.
Well, but let's talk about Delaware. Let's talk about the situation the NAACP has right now, where a young lady gets in a verbal argument with a police officer in Dover. She's drugged out of the car, ends up with broken bones. This happened in Dover. NAACP is working on that case right now. And when you look at the situation in February 2018, when the young man was beat up by a county police officer, and that officer was cleared under Title 11, 464. And what the police department said, that the video footage that his friend had, they had body camera footage that was different and showed what transpired before the beating started. And based on that, the use of force was justified. But they never released it. Okay? And so when you talk about transparency, and then there was a fight over releasing part of the video footage of the Moses case. It hasn't been released in its entirety at all. But you've got the police chiefs, 48 of them saying in this state that the policeman's Bill of Rights and that aspect of it where we want to have a civilian police review board, oh no. They sent a letter saying that you can't do that because it's not fair to subject police officers to 2020 hindsight. Well, what is your investigation process any different in terms of 2020 hindsight? So it's your opinion versus that of the average citizen. And if you read laws in this state and across the nation as it relates to what laws say about a reasonable person similarly situated, well, civilians are going to have a different perspective than law enforcement officers. And what troubles me is, why do, even raising it to the level of 48 police chiefs, why do they want to protect bad cops? Aren't these the officers that you really don't want on your police force?
I think it's really protecting institutional racism. I don't think it's protecting police officers, although those Caucasian buddy friendship whose grandfather was this and the state and that and the other, they protecting them. But it's the system they're protecting. Not it's the institution. It's interesting because even in church we have language that we use where we got to keep the kingdom safe. And I'm not saying they are a church, but they want to keep the institution right. This is what we do. This is who we are, and we protect each other. We cover each other, even at the expense of a disenfranchised community and people of color and things of that nature. And I don't understand it, and I'm sure you don't understand it. But there's a hymn that says we'll understand it better by and by. So we hope if we keep fighting, the by and by get here quick enough. Go ahead, my brother.
No, I agree. And again, one, that requirement to intervene is extremely important. But then it's also on the police chiefs to step up and say, look, we have bad apples and we don't want them in our police force. Because one, it makes it bad for the community, but it also makes it bad for the other officers. And then it's the community aspect of it. The civilian review boards will give new hindsight into what an officer goes through. But like Jay was talking about, 464 and 467 are the code in the Delaware Code that deal with excessive force. Right now, the way it's written is very subjective, which means it's however the officer felt. If you raise your voice with the officer, they can say they feared for their life, so that gave them the right to shoot you.
Before you go any further, there's an interesting situation. I was teaching my daughter a couple things, and she came home one day and she said, "Daddy, there was a fight in school today." I said, "A what?" She said, "A fight." You know what a fight is to my daughter in her school? Two people discussing or arguing. It's a cultural issue. She saw where I come from, a fight is an all-out brawl, okay? In her school, she goes to a Christian academy, and they were arguing. So, Daddy, it was a fighting school. So I'm thinking, oh my gracious, it done reached where she is. And it's a cultural thing. So if a person, why is it that we always look like we're aggressive and we are, our culture is who we are, but I think a lot of times we are misinterpreted. We're asking a question. Officer, could you please tell me why you stopped me? They can't hear that. All they hear is you talking back to me.
Well, and it's to the point where, when I had a little black hair left, I'm working at Dover Downs. I'm late. I'm flying down 13. Pulls me over. said I was going such and such and such, and I said, I was speeding, but I wasn't da-da-da-da-da. Shut your effing mouth. At which point, I'm sorry. Yes, sir. No, sir. And I had to wait till we went to court. Oh, now we in the courthouse. Now, you gonna raise your voice at me and tell me what you're going to offer me? Oh, we had at it. But those are the kind of experiences that never go away. And my brother-in-law, when he was in high school, going down Walnut Street, I'm just taking us back how far this goes. He's going back, going down Walnut Street. I'm sorry, going up French Street. Cop pulls up on him, puts a gun in his head, get out there, somebody had robbed something. He had nothing to do with it. No apology, no anything. He left here, went to Hampton. He's now a dentist, got every dental degree you can have. He don't come back to Wilmington. Comes home for funerals and weddings. Because those things never go away. And I'm saying all that to say, that was in the 60s. And nothing's changed. And it's worse because it's like for all this time, they've been able to get away with it. And the 2003 shooting of Harry Smith at 6th and Franklin, 6th and Harrison. They shot that boy 38 times and left him laying in the street all night. And when the family sued to try to get some justice, as opposed to settling like Dennis did with McDowell, the Baker administration spent millions of dollars defending it. And then, what I'll never forget, because I never missed a day of that trial, the police department was allowed, the police were allowed to come in there in uniform and pack the courtroom. And if that didn't prejudice a Delaware jury, what would? Yeah. Which is another problem we have in terms of, and I think, this is just my opinion, even if we didn't have 464, 467 and Floyd happened here and they were charged, a Delaware jury, you're looking at Delaware jury pool, the jury would have been hung.
Yeah, you know, while you were talking, we're going to go to a break because we're out of time for this segment. But I just recently saw the movie The Butler. And there was a scene in that movie, because I'm a preacher, so I'm always looking for stuff that's there. It's in the beginning, and it traumatized me. When the mother is told by one of the masters to go into the shed with him, he rapes her. And the butler, the guy who plays the butler, he see this. He hear his mother scream. The father is in the field too, and he says to the father, "Dad," in other words, "what are you going to do?" And Dad, as the man is walking back out after raping his mother, he says, "Dad," to the boy says, "Dad," to the father, and the father says, "Hey," to the white man who had just raped his wife and his child's mother. And when the white man turned around, shot him in his head. Yep. In other words, don't challenge me. That mentality exists today. If you watch what happened when the brother who was in uniform, "Why are you stopping me? Don't question me," is what is the real issue. And I have a fundamental problem when we are told that we are equal, that I can't question, which is my right. Before you even arrest me, you must pay attention to the mindset of the institution that protects this racist group or racist these racist policies that occur. We're going to come right back. Before we do,
what do you say? He said, "I'm afraid to get out of the car right now."
Yeah.
And he says, "You ought to be."
Yep.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And he didn't do anything wrong. That's the problem.
Correct.
I shouldn't be afraid. We'll be right back. And we're back. We're going to continue on because we're running out of time. I want to make sure that you have the appropriate amount of time to continue on some of the accountability and the policies that are coming out. So we'll give it back to you.
Yeah, so we talked about the Leah Board amendments that need to happen this session, but we're also we're hopeful that some other bills will come out of this too. So one, requiring every police officer in the state of Delaware to have a body-worn camera, but also with that, there has to be certain policies in place to regulate when they're supposed to be on, how's the data going to be stored, how long the data is going to be stored. And, you know, most unions push for 30 days. That's not enough time. Most people don't even know where to start their complaint at in that time frame. So a minimum of 90 days. And then also, which is the huge part of it, Jay talked to it a lot, was section 464 and 467. We want to see that change from subjective, so when the officer can just say, oh, I feared for my life, to objective for when use of force is warranted and what level of it is warranted. We have some provisions written into different municipalities, like the county has a rule that you're not supposed to shoot at a moving car. That's not a state. But we saw with the Moses case that happened. Not only did they shoot at a moving car, they shot at a moving car going away from them, not putting them in imminent danger. So
so you're saying the county has a policy you're not supposed to, but the county came into the city and violated
its own
policy, but they weren't in the county, so I guess they didn't violate it.
Well, I mean,
no, they're sworn in as county officers. That's their home jurisdiction. So they still have to follow those laws because Wilmington technically is still in Newcastle County. They don't have to know Wilmington's laws, but they're taught not to shoot into a moving car unless it's coming directly at them. In the Moses case, he was going off to the side. You can clearly see he's going towards the opposite side of the vehicle where all the officers were standing.
Well, the fact of the matter is, in my opinion, and what I saw from the camera footage, it's an egregious violation of departmental policy. And second, and I think I'm saying the same thing I said last week, I asked for a copy of the jurisdictional agreement, and I was told that the only jurisdictional agreement is what's allowed by code in terms of, and I don't even know what she called it, I have it in my phone, but in terms of support, for lack of a better term. Well, if there isn't one, there should be one. And now I want to see all the jurisdictional agreements between all the police agencies and what it says in terms of what they can and can't do. If none exist, then one should exist. How do you have the right to come into the city of Wilmington and just do what they did without any notification, without any reason? And when other police agencies are trying to arrest a suspect, they come in the city and use all the force they want to use, including military-style operations, which I don't think are appropriate, and especially in this climate when historically and traditionally military-style operations doing civil unrest have a tendency, at least in the opinion of some experts, to escalate as opposed to de-escalating. But you know, all that's being ignored, and I have a major problem.
And it's not just the county on that. I mean, even the mayor of Wilmington, when people really started protesting about George Floyd, he had fire trucks out there and they were standing on top of the fire truck with their hoses. I've never seen something like that in my day. And that's what I think it escalated the situation the day everything went bad. If that's how people who were originally peacefully protesting were meant, that's going to change a lot of people. And I just saw.
Well, let's look at that. Let's look at them raising the bridges so people couldn't get in and out of the city. And let's look at the state police on 95 with long guns. Okay?
They were on the roof of the Queen, too.
Okay, all those things have a tendency to escalate. But when I ask for a policy, which I'm going to get, okay, what is your written policy as it relates to response to civil unrest and civil disobedience? Y'all can play hide and go seek with it if you want. I'm gonna get it, and you're playing hide and go seek with it because you probably think that people like me will have a problem with what is or is not written. So I have a major problem with that.
They're administrating off the cuff. No.
They're doing the exact same thing they did in the 60s. The exact same thing. You come in with riot gear, and now you've got this military vehicle, and you bogart, intimidate, harass. The exact same thing the National Guard did to us in 1978 with the long guns and the bayonets in our faces and cursing people out, and just took over the entire community.
Wow. This is really disheartening, but we got to make sure we put this information out to the community, because if the community is not aware, what happens is it's a psychological thing that's going on. A lot of things that is the hidden hand that's going on, and the hidden hand is racism. Our communities of color, communities that are disenfranchised, is always affected by every policy. This is the reason why voting is very important. I was mesmerized when you shared, even when you were down there supporting the George Floyd and pictures appeared in Wilmington of you allegedly embracing violence, because this is what happens when they want to push people out of the way. But voting matters too, and we have not got a chance to even talk about that. But writing to a legislator, writing to the governor, writing to the mayor, all of those things are wonderful, but we got to start voting in mass numbers, because your vote matters, and there's results, and there's what comes out of an election dictates the trajectory of a state, a city, county. And all too often we are sitting here, we're reading the policies and feel hopeless. We feel we don't have any value. But this is the truth. The truth is, you gotta vote. You gotta vote, and we have to stop voting for people who wanna give us fish sandwiches instead of leading us to the pond and teaching us how to fish. We can do for ourselves. One of the things I did, and I'm not trying to make this an easy and fair thing, but one of the things I wanted to do, Brother Street, when I came to this city, is I wanted to show that black people who are Christian can do for themselves. We don't have any grants here. We don't. Because by now I'll be in jail probably, because they will find a way to get me. But what we do have is a few tithing, which I haven't gotten yours yet. We have a few folks who decide I'm gonna sell a chicken dinner. And we've built some major buildings, and we have some major programs going on. We can do for ourselves. But when you have a racist system, it continues to choke. And while we're trying to get better in certain areas as a community, this racist system always put us back in place of where they feel we need to be. So when we are talking about all of this, and I'm gonna come right to you, when we're talking about all of this, it all ties together. It's a systematic issue. Go ahead, my brother.
So I just had to check my phone to make sure I get it right. But a good friend and a mentor to mine that I've known for over a decade now, Reverend Warnock, who's now in the U.S. Senate.
Yeah.
When he was running, and I was down in Georgia with him, he said that prayer is voting is the type of prayer that you want to see the world you live in. Voting is a fundamental right. It's your voice for change. And it's the greatest tool we have in nonviolent civil disobedience, direct action. And building upon that, and building upon what Jay was talking about with disobedience, civil disobedience, and how, one, the police just see any black people organizing as a threat to them. Where for me, I've studied Dr. King, I've studied the Poor People's Campaign, I've given lectures at Harvard about nonviolent civil disobedience. This is who I am as a person.
Right.
So regardless of if I was running for office, if I was working in the corporate world, I'm still have to be true to myself.
Absolutely.
So in my organizing, I reflect what I learned. And I learn from those who believe that nonviolence is the way forward. Now, direct action is important.
And you've proven it. Because the week after the protest where all you know what broke loose, you organized that protest, and there were no incidents. And your training told you, even in the end, when people were walking away and it looked like things might get out of hand, you called the police chief and said, walk out with us. That changed the whole scenario to the ending. 2 weeks ago, you organized the protest in Rodney Square. 200 people, you had a police escort, there were no incidents. So you've proven in no uncertain terms that you know how to do this, and you're following your training. And Pastor, I gotta come back to you, and this may sound strange, because you quoted scripture. I'm gonna quote James Brown, and I said it the day we broke ground for the library on Route 9. James Brown said, "I don't want nobody to give me nothing. Open up the door, and I'll get it myself."
Yes, sir.
And that's the reason I wanted the library. And what I said to the governor and the county exec on that stage is, open up the door, they get it themselves.
That's right.
And my best friend, we were at the University of Delaware together, he challenged the grade. Our mentor at the University of Delaware, Dick Wilson, went to the professor, and the professor said, "Well, Mr. Wilson, looks like you want me to give him a grade." Mr. Wilson said, "I don't want you to give any black student anything, but I'm going to demand that you give them what they earn."
Amen. We are talented. We are creative. God has so gifted us to go through all we went through, and we survived, and we're still here. We don't want, I'm gonna quote James Brown with you. I love that quote. I put that in sermons as well. You know, you ain't got to just open up the door, and I'll go in and get it myself. You know, when you was even talking about Dr. King and many others, they talk about prayer. Prayer is the key to the kingdom. But don't forget the last part of that. But faith unlocks the door. Faith without works is dead. So with prayer, there has to be some movement. You cannot, and I'm not saying, now I'm sometimes more on the radical side of Dr. King. So it's good to have people around me who are not, because I don't mind going to 95 and closing 95 down. I made those propositions and people walked away from me saying he's too radical. But I don't mind. But when it comes down to getting what is rightfully ours, somebody has to stand up. God did not bless you, Brother Street, you, Brother Owens, me, Pastor Curry, to be where we are today with the voice. He says to Jeremiah, I know I have a lot of church people listening to us. He said, lift up your voice like a trumpet and sound loud. For all of us who are playing scary cat and need the chicken dinners, need the chicken sandwich and need the fish sandwich, instead of being taught how to fish and fend for ourselves, sure, you will always have those. I confessed to y'all last week. I said, you know, I feel bad because I was in a strong fight and I felt good about it. I felt that things should get better in the state of Delaware, but I was left out there. People walked away and they left me out there a couple of times. And I decided, let's just come back home and do what we got to do for this community. But at some point, after having these discussions, I'm going to have a conversation with Channel 28 and with our media team here today. I want to just start a relationship where maybe we need to do more sharing with our community. What's going on in Delaware? I don't know what we'll name the show. We're going to name it something. But I'm going to pull us together. And I'm saying it now on this show. Maybe it's what's happening in Delaware. What's going on? Because on the legislative side, on the human rights side, we need to be aware. Some of the stuff you all should, I would have never read the Bill of Rights for the police officers had you all not brought to my attention. I didn't even know why are they not doing this? Why are they not doing that? And how can a grand jury not find them guilty with all of this I see? Well, when you're protected by a system, you can. That's what happens. So the more education we get, the better we'll feel. So I'll end this show by giving you, Brother Street, an opportunity to share anything you want to share, give you an opportunity to share what you want to share, and then I'll just close it out.
No, I mean, to he who is given much is required. Yeah. And I have felt for my entire adult life that I had a responsibility to give back. As I told you before, I was not a model child. And not for the late, great Louis L. Redden, who was also the family attorney. All those things that I were arrested for as a juvenile, I would have been convicted of, but the master, Mr. Redden, made it possible for me to be able to have all that expunged because there are no convictions. The point being, okay, I've had discrepancies in interactions with police, but I had two parents with government jobs who could afford to pay Mr. Redden. My boys ain't had that. Okay, so a lot of them ended up in different places, in situations, and those things, once you're tight and you're close with somebody, care how different how you go your separate ways, you're always that way. And so it's not just my kids at the center, it's their kids, their grandkids, and the responsibility, if you're going to be in these positions, you're going to be a community center director, what difference did you make while you were there?
Amen.
So
Amen.
that's the way I look at it. And what's the use of people putting me in office, electing me? And what I said when I ran was, if you want somebody who's going to speak up and speak out, I'm your man. And I think for the 16 years that I've served, if I haven't done anything else, I've done that, and little litigation on top of that, and have a responsibility to work with others to make a positive change.
Amen.
In our great community.
Unbossed,
And
unbought. Amen. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to follow that. And I'm just honored to be here with both of y'all to have this discussion and talk about where we need to go as a community. Again, I would say this to people: please stay involved. The Delaware Campaign for Fair Policing, the NAACP, the ACLU, they're all working to get this done on a legislative side. And if you want to join, look at their Facebook, look at their pages, their websites and stuff like that. Continue to learn, look at the laws yourself and read them yourself, but then also look at where your legislators are. Look at where your state senator, state representative are on the issue. On a federal level, we got the George Floyd Policing Act passed the House, and Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester was a huge advocate for that and did a lot of the heavy behind the scenes work on that. It's held up in the Senate right now because of the filibuster. The filibuster is a rule that you have to have 60 votes to start discussion to be able to vote, but you only need 51 votes to pass it. And Republicans have used that. It's time to get rid of the filibuster.
I agree.
It's time, because it's not only holding up the George Floyd and Policing Act.
Let us argue, okay? You get rid of the filibuster, and then what happens
When the Republicans,
if the Republicans, they only need one more, and now you reverse.
And then they'll get
And they didn't do that even with Trump. So I would respectfully suggest that those who are advocating nationwide for filibuster need to look at it very closely, because you're running down a slippery slope.
Yeah, you would change it to a talking filibuster, so the option to still filibuster is there, but it wouldn't be the 60 vote requirement. It would have to be strategically, senators would have to stand up and continue to talk on the issue. And with coordination today, with younger senators today as well too, people could talk for longer periods of times, and then you rotate out with another Democratic senator if we were to lose it. But also with that is DC statehood. You have hundreds of thousands of disenfranchised black people down in DC. That would add 2 senators. You have the Voting Rights Act. You have the For the People Act. That would change and end gerrymandering. It would change and end these practices that we're seeing in Georgia, that we're seeing in Minnesota, that are being introduced. Over 250 bills that are being introduced in 43 states to disenfranchise that minority vote. If you pass legislation like that, that reverses all that, you will see a more healthy democracy, but you would also see more Democrats get elected as well too. Because if you look at Georgia right now, the places where they're saying, oh, early voting can't be 15 days, it can only be 7 days or something like that. And how many places can be open? It's in black counties. When I was down there in Georgia, in one of the counties I was working in, there was 13 places you should have been able to vote in. How they've always had it. They moved it down to 2 in a black county. But in the white counties, they increased it because they knew that's where their numbers were going to come from the 14th, from the 1st district down there. But in the 6th and the 7th, where they knew was swing districts, Democrats had a good chance, but Republicans still could maybe pull something off. That's where they closed voting places. So you saw the long lines on election day. And let me tell you, the black people down there, they showed out.
They did.
They partied
They
the
did.
polls.
They did. They did.
So,
and
yeah.
I'm hoping that we will be able to take this conversation that we had today and take it to heart. This was not an opportunity for us to bash police. This was an opportunity for us to share with you that the system upon which they are under is what gives them the license
To bash
do.
us.
And that's right, to do and do us wrong. But what we have to do is we have to deal with the system. If a daycare has to report, if a daycare has standards where we won't be able to just let them run all over the state and do all kind of crazy stuff, then certainly those who are with lethal weapons should have some kind of system to show to show that they are under some kind of containment or constraints. So we want to thank Councilman Brother Street, and I want to thank you, Brother Owens, for being with me today. And as I said, we're going to put something together. We get ready to come back strong. And when we come back again, I hope it's on another show where we can just do what we got to do and update our community. We'll be right back. And we're back. Listen, we're going to go ahead and close out this show. I am so glad and grateful to God that we had an opportunity to have Brother Street as well as Brother Owens as we talked about the Learboard standards, or should I say what the police departments are under, and how so many things they're able to do because of the system that they serve under. But I want you to know that we're going to spend some time, and I've already shared with Brother Street as well as Brother Owens, I'm going to try to launch another show. And the new show, we don't know the name of it right now, but I just want them to come back, and we want to start talking about what's happening in Delaware. Someone has to be the voice of our community. I know there are those who are out there who are activists who are doing some phenomenal things. They are helping to talk to the community, but I want to make sure that we have a medium that we can certainly display and continue to talk about what's going on in the legislation, talk about what's going on with the city as well as the county. These things are important because we are living in a culture of racism. And racism is not talking about an individual, but it's talking about the system. It's systematic. And we have to make sure those of us who God has blessed to come out of and not be under. God raised us up for such a time so that we will be able to share with the community and be the voice. If you find that people are afraid after God has blessed them, then they are not giving true justice to what God has called them to do. God saved me that I may be able to help save somebody else. God delivered me that I might be able to help deliver somebody else. God has emancipated me so that I can help those who are in chains and those who are struggling. So what is my point? My point is simple and clear. We have to be the voice. We have to speak up. We have to sound the trumpet. And yes, it's going to cost. It's going to cost me. It's going to cost others. But what we got to do is we got to always let justice reign, because God is on the side of the oppressed. I hope and trust that this show was good for you today, and I hope and trust that you learned something. And listen, as we continue to learn, we're going to continue to bring it to you. Until the next time, God bless you.